Sheltering a fleet of boats from the vagaries of the sea has always been the raison d'être of the port of Le Havre, founded 5 centuries ago by Francois I. In late October 2023, the 30th anniversary of the Transat Jacques Vabre, the Paul Vatine Basin once again protected the fleet from all that nature could throw at it. Plans for a full fleet race start were scuppered by a series of exceptional autumnal storms that rolled in across the North Atlantic and English Channel. And so, many of the 95 crews preparing to start this 16th edition of the race had to wait over a week before reaching the open sea. But right up until the evening before the race was due to start, preparations had been going like a dream.
It's time for the latest edition of the Transat Jacques Vabre. That means a celebration of the 30th anniversary of the race. It should be a huge celebration. The time's come for an exceptional sporting competition. Let's go.
Despite the damp weather, the crowds took advantage of any ray of sunshine to enjoy the holiday atmosphere and maybe dream a little too. And with 10 days still to go to the start, it was a chance for the crews to fine-tune their machines. To mark 30 years since Paul Vatine won the very first edition in 1993, the Council of Le Havre created the Winners' Promenade along the quayside, featuring plaques bearing the names of the 67 winners of the 15 editions of the race. Many of those winners were competing this year. Roland Jourdain, Erwan Leroux, Sébastien Rogue, Jan Eliès, all of them joined at the unveiling by some of the most talented names in French sailing. For so many top sailors, the unique double-handed format has made the Transat Jacques Vabre a must-do race.
Sur la Transat, on est sur un format double.
On the Transat, we're in a double-handed format, and that means the competition's a bit tighter, the lineup can be more homogeneous. In solo sailing, the exercise is often a bit more technical to find the right moments, the right angles. In double-handed races, especially transatlantic, it throws you different challenges and kind of levels the playing field. I like double-handed racing because it's similar to solo racing, but with many of the advantages of crewed racing and the comfort of crewed racing. I love this sort of racing. We spend a lot of seasons doing single-handed events, so it's a lot more fun to share great moments together in the ocean, especially in such good company. To be able to share this, to be able to work the boat hard at pretty much 100%, it's really satisfying. Double-handed sailing is quite interesting because you can go quite far in terms of performance and the use of the boat, but at the same time, you've got to stay lucid enough to keep exchanging ideas and tactics with the other person. Sometimes you start to feel tired, and that makes things a lot harder. Beyond being two professional sailors who sail together, there is a history of friendship behind it too, so yeah, it's pretty cool. The Jacques Vabre is really all about openness to other people.
The Paul Vatine Basin, named after the first 2-times winner who died at sea during the 1998 edition, is a magical place. For 10 days, tens of thousands of spectators from all over France come to discover and explore these extraordinary raceboats, dive a little deeper into the adventure that awaits the competitors, and learn the history of what's known as the Coffee Route Race.
Allez, encore. Ouais, là tu redescends. Et tu montes. Retire. Simplement, sans s'énerver. Voilà, on a le temps. On a le temps, il n'y a pas de souci.
Amongst the competitors is Félix de Navacelle, who was paired up with Tanguy Letourquet on the Imoca Lazare. He's a distant descendant of a sailor who introduced coffee to Martinique, so his mission is to transport a coffee plant to the West Indies.
We're really talking to a descendant of Gabriel Leclerc, who, way back 1721, brought the first coffee plant to Martinique, planted it on his property in Le Prêcheur, and then coffee production spread to Martinique and then out to the French West Indies, ultimately to Latin America. It's the historical link between Gabriel Leclerc, who actually brought these coffee plants with him back in the 18th century, and a great-grandchild of this ancestor who today sets sail as a coast skipper on Lazare. It's extraordinary. That line in history is unbroken.
L'histoire ne bégait pas, mais elle se poursuit.
Lazare, du café. What else?
This year's fleet of 95 boats is made up of 4 classes, 2 monohulls and 2 multi-hulls. Giant trimarans make up the Ultime class. 32 metres long and 23 wide, these flying multi-hulls have more than 600 square metres of sail and can reach speeds of up to 80 kilometres per hour. The sailors are all experienced and all the boats tried and tested in competition, so the class is expected to be close. Edmond de Rothschild has dominated the last 2 seasons, but her rivals have closed the performance gap. Banque Populaire and SVR Lazatique are looking particularly strong, and Sodebo and Actual are also right there. As the fastest boats in the race, the all teams have been set the longest course and will have to round 2 islands in the heart of the South Atlantic before reaching Martinique. The smaller trimarans, known as the Ocean 50, measure 15 metres by 15 and have a 23-metre mast. They're often compared to go-karts for their lightness and power. 6 boats line up for this year's Transat Jacques Vabre, and their crews have done a lot of racing this year, so there are lots of rivalries to be settled in these explosive multi-hulls. Imocas are 18-metre boats designed to take on the world's toughest oceans. The more recent boats are equipped with large foils that enable them to fly above the waves and reach speeds that are mind-boggling for monohulls. For the first time in the class's history, 40 competitors are lining up at the start. The pairings of Thomas Rouillon and Morgan Legravier, Jeremy Bayou and Frank Camas, Sam Goodchild and Antoine Koch are amongst the punters' favourites. However, another big favourite is missing. Local boy Charlie Dallan and his new boat Massif were forced to pull out for medical reasons. The biggest category is the 12-metre Class 40. Of the 44 professional and amateur pairs at the start line, around 10 are in with a chance of winning. These experienced sailors at the helm of powerful boats are expecting a tough but exciting regatta. The race start approaches, the weather predictions for the first week at sea are becoming clearer. The crews will face a large and violent low-pressure system as they leave the English Channel, cross the Bay of Biscay and head south. It's an exceptionally dangerous situation for the slower boats because they won't be able to outrun the storm. Still close to the coast, they will be in the greatest danger. Saturday morning, the day before the race is due to begin. And Francis Le Goff, the race director, makes a big call. He's adding a stopover for the slower boats. Following the race start, the Class 40s will have to make their way to the port of Lorient to take shelter.
Je vous souhaite une excellente course à tous. Sage Francis, hein?
Sage Francis, he's the guardian angel of us all.
Nous tous.
It was too risky. There'd have been a lot of damage potentially. It was too dangerous, so all the competitors had to stop in Lorient, so everyone stayed safe. So we have two races, in effect. First, a race to Lorient. We stop there. Then we resume with perhaps a slight change to the course, so the gaps with the other classes aren't too big.
On Sunday morning, just as the sailors are preparing to set off, there's more news from the race director. The weather forecasts have worsened, and the race plans will have to be changed again.
Well, this low-pressure area has deepened again. It's even stronger in terms of wind and waves around Cape Finisterre. There's a lot of concern that a large part of the fleet won't be able to navigate around Cape Finisterre. On the other hand, any who do get through, because they're very fast, they will risk serious damage in the process, given that conditions are deteriorating all the time. That danger is what motivated my decision.
So, after a short leg, the Ocean 50s will be joining the Class 40s in Lorient.
It's up to us to adapt, to accept we won't be setting off on this 15-day race just yet. Another 24 hours to wait, at least some extra time ashore, without knowing really when we'll get going. It's a new experience, to say the least. This is the 16th edition of the Transat Jacques Vabre. They always say there's no two alike. This is certainly unique.
Whilst the Class 40s, Ocean 50s and all teams would all start on time, the IMOCA boats would have to wait where they were. With no port on the Atlantic coast big enough to accommodate 40 18-metre race boats all at once, there was no alternative but to sit out the storms in Le Havre.
There's no sense in risking a crash just to show we're the strongest in the world. Don't end up with broken boats or hoists or things like that. So, yeah, I think it's a wise decision on the part of the race directors.
Only the all teams would be heading straight to Martinique as planned, thanks to their great speed, allowing them to outrun the oncoming depression. Right on cue, the greyness over Le Havre opened up to give us some sunshine for the departure of the old teams, the only boats on an unchanged course to Martinique's Fort de France. The 5 trimarans headed straight out to sea with the aim of rounding the Cotentin Peninsula, exiting the English Channel overnight, and then heading for Spain as quickly as possible to avoid the oncoming storm Kieran. Their speed was dazzling in these heavy seas, their playground immense, their speed rising 30 to 35 knots. They were off and expected to cover 12,000 kilometres in just 2 weeks. Francois Gabart and Tom Lepêche got off to the best start on SVR La Zatique. "15 minutes later, and the second fleet of multi-hulls took to the start line. Conditions for the Ocean 50s also meant a very fast start, but being lower down in the water forced them to climb every wave. It's a sprint down a bumpy track to Lorient. That first leg should take just 24 hours, but is wrought with difficulties. All the traffic in the English Channel, large tides creating strong currents along the Brittany coast. Then there are the Channel Islands and the Breton Islands to slalom through. And all the time, the incessant pressure from rivals. In this maelstrom of action, it's Solidaire en peloton skippered by Quentin Vlaming and Thibaut Vauchel-Camus who find the best route. The last start of the day was for the Class 40s, but the wind was getting even stronger. 25 knots gusting to more than 30 with heavy seas, giving fans some spectacular action. For these smaller boats, it'll take 2 days of racing to get to Lorient.
So how was the departure? It was hairy. Let's just say we'll remember it. We've been racing for, what, just over an hour? We've just passed the last mark on the coastal course. There's still 30 knots of wind.
As they navigated Brittany, the smaller multi-hulls were also facing increasingly strong winds and were hitting really high speeds. On Monday morning, Thibaut Vauchel-Camus and Quentin Vlaming were the first to reach Lorient after just 20 hours of sailing. A perfect trial run to build confidence ahead of taking cover in port. Later, Luc Berry and Antoine Joubert, the newcomers to the class, also came in. Within 4 hours, all 6 trimarans were safely in port with no large time gaps to separate them ahead of the restart to Martinique. In the Class 40s, the conditions were tough and the first night was violent, with heavy weather and heavy seas battering the crews. At around 1 a.m, the news came through that Credit Mutuel, the boat owned by Ian Lipinski and Antoine Carpentier, had been dismasted. By contrast, Ambrogio Beccaria on Alla Grande made light work of the changing currents and violent winds, staying in the lead throughout the rounding of Brittany. The Italian led the fleet into Lorient after 34 hours at sea. Xavier Macaire was second. The top 10 were all within 2 hours of each other. And so the waiting began. It lasted 8 days. Exiting the English Channel took half a day for the oil teams despite the headwind. The crews carried out a series of manoeuvres to make their way through the heavy and dangerous seas. Each tack took a long time, requiring a great deal of physical effort. The wind continued to blow hard, and the trimarans were reefed to avoid being caught out by the gusts. The sailors busy steering and managing the flight of their huge trimarans. By Sunday evening, after 10 hours of sailing, the fleet of Ultimes was approaching the tip of Brittany. It was time for the first split. Francois Gabard and Tom Lepêche on SVR Lazartigue opted to continue on their westward tack, intending to cross a low-pressure front and pick up some strong winds afterwards before moving south, and so they set off on a speedy descent of the Bay of Biscay. SVR Lazartigue were leading from Edmond de Rothschild and Banque Populaire.
We're in the wake of the low-pressure system we've been crossing since this morning. There are quite a few squalls out there. It's pretty violent. The seas are really rough. We're trying to find the right setting so as not to go too fast without getting whistled at by the policemen.
After the high speeds came an area of light breeze for the leading trio of boats near the islands of Madeira. That was the moment Armel Leclerc and Sébastien Josse, assisted from shore by their weather router Marcel Van Triest, attempted a big move to the west.
Evening inspection. Just off Madeira and Porto Santo. There were 2 options last night. Banque Pop went north of Madeira. to avoid the wind shift. We went below, hoping the wind shift would go well. We've stayed in the old wind, but Armel's touched some wind.
It proved a key moment in the race, as Banque Populaire took the lead for the first time. SVR and Edmond de Rothschild followed as they crossed the archipelago, but Sedebo and Actual were left behind. Once on this very long downwind leg, Leclerc and Josse managed better angles and better speed. Getting across the tricky doldrums proved to be a formality for Banque Populaire. The blue trimaran had a good lead by the time she passed the Sao Paulo and San Pedro mark off Brazil. Charles Caudrelier with Erwin Israel and Francois Gabart with Tom Lepech were battling for second place.
Still not much wind. We're waiting for a little more air. And there is Gitana, right there.
Thomas Coville and Thomas Rouxel were a long way behind. The weather conditions were less favourable and they watched the leaders racing away. After they finished the race, they admitted that their starboard rudder had been damaged when they entered the doldrums.
The doldrums were supposed to be easy to get through, but they weren't. In any case, they lived up to their legend for us. I think they were kinder to others, sure, but that's the lottery of the doldrums. We've been in the southern hemisphere for a few hours now, heading for Ascension Island. We've got a big fore and aft leg lasting about 3 days, and then it'll be a big downward leg onto Martinique.
Meanwhile, some great upwind sailing saw Gabart and Lepech on SVR Lazati claw their way back to the front. The pair erased a gap of nearly 100 miles in just a few hours to regain first place. It proved a powerful tonic and morale boost on board.
We're on the windward side of Ascension Islands. This is it, in the lead. The Jenica is ready to go. Just look, it's beautiful, isn't it? Come on, it's Jenica time.
At the last course mark, Gabart and Lepech began a very long downwind Atlantic crossing, nearly 5,000 kilometres, and their lead was very small. Banque Populaire was second, Edmond de Rothschild third, but they were about to pass the leading pair.
We're running into SVR, our little friends who've already passed Ascension Island. We'll take a look. Well, Pop can't be too far off.
Now, Banque Populaire had found a downwind point of sail in which she performed better than any of the others. Leclerc and Josse had already found that sweet spot in Madeira, and now they used it again on the descent along South America, taking it in turns at the helm every 2 hours, playing the conditions magnificently, flying over the water, surfing the waves, the art of racing at its best. With Banque Populaire flirting with 40 knots, SVR relinquished her lead. Now in second place, the threat from Edmond de Rothschild had evaporated. A mechanical failure to the helm system and a damaged foil had hamstrung Charles Caudrelier's boat. And so out in front, Banque Populaire was gone. And there was now no threat to SVR in second place. Edmond de Rothschild sat third, but would have to fight to defend her position from the revived Sedebo and Actual, who were closing in.
We're there. Banque Populaire's crossed the line.
On the evening of Sunday the 12th of November, after 14 days and 10 hours of intense racing, and in their first race together, Armel Leclerc and Sébastien Josse won the Transat Jacques Vabre in the all-team class, after covering 9,623 miles at an average speed of 26 knots.
It's a great joy because it's been a long time since Mont Populaire and I came here looking for a big win.
Une route du Rhum difficile l'année dernière, faut pas oublier quand même, il y a un an, on avait fait demi-tour.
A year ago, we turned back, changed dagger boards. It was a completely different story, and now we're back. We've put in all that hard work behind the scenes, and we've shown it on the water. It's great.
Francois Gabart and Tom Lepech reached Martinique 4 hours and 51 minutes behind the winners. 2 days later, Charles Caudrelier and Erwin Israel came third. So, time for the all teams to enjoy the sunshine of Martinique, but for the other 3 classes still at sea, the battle rages on in the trade winds.